Hello, everyone. My name is James Lindsay. I am the Sales and Marketing Coordinator at Coach House Books, and welcome to the launch for Heady Bloom by Andrew Faulkner. This is the second book of poetry Coach House has published for him, including his debut, The Need Machine, which from 2013, which I went to the launch for, so he signed it for me, but that's just for me, from Andrew. Yeah, we're welcome. We're really happy and excited to be putting out this incredible book by a really great poet, who I'm sure you all know, a beloved guy. We're going to have some readings. Andrew's going to read from this book. He's going to talk a bit about it. We're going to bring out the editor of the book, Matthew Tierney, to talk a bit about it. But before we do that, I am going to read a land acknowledgement. Let's grab a land acknowledgement. We are coming to you tonight from Toronto, so I'm going to read our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, including the Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. All right. So first up, we have author of Midday at the Super Cameo Candy. I always have to think about how to say that. Matthew Tierney, who edited this book. Matthew, this is Matthew's what, third, fourth, fifth, 10th book we've done for him? It's up there. Matthew is the author of 3 previous collections of poetry. Full Speed, Through the Morning Dark, Hey Flick, Limit, and Probably Inevitable. He has received the Trillium Award for Poetry, the P-Cage Founders Award, and the KM Hunters Artists Award. He lives in Toronto. Everyone, please welcome Matthew Tierney. Hey, Matthew.
Hey, James, how you doing? Thanks
Good.
for the intro.
You're welcome. I'll toss it over to you. I'll come back in a bit, though, to say hi.
Okay, sounds good. So I'm just going to read 3 very short poems, and I'm going to introduce Andrew, and we'll get right into the real deal here. So I was looking through my previous book. All these poems are written, of course, previous to the world we live in today. So the poems stay the same, but the world around it changes, and it kind of changes the poems. So the first one I'm going to read is called People Plan. So little room on the platform, it's dystopian. Can't decipher whether my fellow commuter, intent on his tablet, is a proficient first-person shooter if I'm his equal. Is there any measure more biblical than a stone's throw? Underground, what sunlight there is refused us. I've mixed feelings pointing out the obvious. Either you understand my ambivalence or you do not. In the kingdom of conspiracies, anyone could be a theorist. On the surface, fruit rots in horn-shaped bowls. Mirror man, are here hairs turning silver, last chance to exchange looks. You first. So the next poem I'm going to read is called Oppenheimer's Soul and the Mathematical Sublime. The mathematical sublime is it's a notion from Kant to explain or describe the feeling when reason sort of outpaces the imagination, when we can reason about something but we can't really imagine it. Oppenheimer's Soul and the Mathematical Sublime. The man with a tattoo of Da Vinci's The Last Supper, the entire length of his forearm, reveals something about belief or beauty. It's for us to choose. Down the gallery hall, a Baroque sculpture of Christ crucified, suffering as normal, life-sized. How far are you willing to go? 1951, Nevada. Fur afire from the blast wave, a rabbit lights out over the desert floor, outrunning recurring terror. Here's as close to the truth as I can get you. Radiation from a tube TV could separate the human form from matter. If you think you can imagine that, you possibly can't. And just quickly, I'll end with a new one, maybe pivot a little bit. So these new poems I'm writing are kind of like sketches. They kind of look like this. kind of running down the page. I don't know if you can see that. And this is sort of like the momentary stays of my life, I guess. I just picked these moments and kind of sketched them out. So we adopted our son from birth, and this poem is entitled, "On First Hearing, We Were Chosen by Your Birth Mother." Memory of pain is not pain. The clearing, a circle of embrace and resistance, wavelengths crackle at its perimeter like a telegraph key taking on the Atlantic. You were known of before known. We, fearful of love, the unforeseen, an impulse blown field in shards at our feet, air webbed with circuits, each breath, first arrival, then dust-torn sigh of the circus pulling out of town, we, bless us, held. Thank you. So Andrew Faulkner, I remember reading Need Machine, this one way back, and I was excited about it. It was a great book. I was about 2 or 3 poems from its end, and I was taking it on, I was going to read it at a park, so I took that on a bike ride. I had nowhere to put it, so I kind of wadded it up behind my seat, and I went out, and I looked down 10, 15 minutes later, and it was gone. And of course, 2, 3 poems from the end, you think, I'll just leave it. No, I retraced my route all the way back, and I found it in the middle of Broadview Avenue. And this new book here is even better than that. So that says something. Andrew is, these poems, don't take this the wrong way, but they're better than I remember. I don't, I've been excited about this book all through the stages, from submission to acceptance, all that stuff as we worked on it. But I read it again through recently, and it's just like, wow. And maybe this is something to do with editing the book, where you're kind of focused on just kind of making it better. But it's quite a work. His poems, they're tenderhearted. They're funny, but not obnoxious funny, just kind of sly funny. And they're the poems that are eager for you to like them, and you will like them. So Andrew, he's the former winner of BP Nicol Chapbook Award. He's an MFA from University of Guelph and lives in Picton, Ontario. Please give a warm welcome to Andrew Faulkner. Andrew.
Hello. Thanks, Matthew. Andrew, better than you remember. That's I like that. It's much better than what I had, which was Andrew, not as bad as you recall. So I will get my business cards updated. There are so many of you. Thank you all for coming to this. I really appreciate it. It's a strange thing to send a book out into the world now. So thanks for helping me do it, all of you. I'll hop right in and read a couple poems. So obviously this is a book in large part about having a headache, a literal headache, not a metaphorical headache like the cat. And throughout the book, Advil sort of takes on a life of its own and sort of gains personality. And so we'll get started there with a poem called What Advil Gets Up To. Advil rolls up its sleeves. We gonna get started or what? From spit and straw, Advil assembles amphetamine's scarecrow cousin. Advil sucks its teeth as it thinks. Advil is thick, as always Advil is thick, with representation. Advil, coated in gypsum dust, asks, what's an empty room supposed to look like? In a moleskin, Advil notes the capacity for feeling hasn't changed, but the field of sensation narrows. Advil makes a jerk-off motion as I sleep. Advil shows a Polaroid of me to the news cameras. It's gruesome that someone so handsome should disappear. Advil is always in the process of rolling its sleeves. 3 days on Wikipedia, fiddling with dates. Advil swears it's just documenting facts, sir. At the early hours threshold, Advil asks, why not you? This is what it's like, if you can believe it. At the corporate retreat, Advil insists on the profound, the meaningful. But why not me? Advil tickles my thigh. want to interrogate the present? Advil's clean lines are appealing, but no. This next poem comes to you from the trenches of the Great Generational War, sponsored by Brandvan 3000, and the first time my toddler ever listened to A Tribe Called Quest. It's called Geriatric Millennial Vibes on Nostalgia. Listen, I got the flavor for the fever. Listen, I'd like to be someone who believes the past resides in a reachable place. So I track an idea by its direction, to be funky as a bomb over Baghdad or a missile over Kosovo. Wisp of cloud in the shape of a dollar sign, a shadow over a pornography of snow. Recall that Informer was played everywhere, and a semi-charmed decade hinged on the relationship between money, which is a problem, and problems which bob in the eddies of compound interest. Ah, the good times. Those were the good times. So listen, can I kick it? My toddler wants to know, repeats it endlessly. Can I kick it? Can I kick it? Can I kick it? Can I kick it? Both question and answer. Signal of a signal. To be given a sign and then hit by it again, again, baby, one more time. So I want to read a poem called Self-Portrait from Another Room, and I'd like to read it for two reasons. The first is I've always wanted to say, so I do something, this or that in every book I've written, which is really hard to do when you only have one book, because everything you do is in every book. But now that I have two books, I can say, in every book I've written, I have a self-portrait. So thank you for that. And also, as my wife pointed out to me, so the poem Self-Portrait from Another Room. I'm here in my kitchen, you're in another room, so this is literally a self-portrait from another room, yeah. Self-portrait from another room. Two arms, two legs, and arranged, like most appliances, along a central axis. A thicket of teeth and blood for the taking. A real angel, a real retractable cord type. If a clay vessel's useful because it's hollow, what's it to him that he's full to the brim? He thinks his thoughts as one scoops ice cream. Poor sweet porthole soul, poor jar of piss longing to be vinegar. Two eyes in his face and face square in his head, always next door to where he is. There's a poem called IPO, really good example for why you should not subscribe to my financial markets Substack. IPO. The IPO is a body of light, the brochure says, crisp as a Bud Light and steady as she goes. The IPO asks me to think of a thesis that renders itself obsolete. The IPO asks about a future that claws its hours back. Would I like that? Would I like a metaphor to diffuse some obvious and fucked up tension? I would, right? The IPO is like, come on, man, and points to the horizon. It asks me not to split my attention, but I know not how. I have nothing for the IPO. I am sorry. The IPO is sorry. Hordes of faces in sleeplessness, all sorry. The evening apologizes in a profuse bloom. It's obscene how sorry it is. I'm just going to read two more poems. This one is it's a mashup of two poems, one by Terence Hayes and one by Sylvia Plath. All the words are theirs. I changed the punctuation here and there, and I sort of trimmed theirs, obviously, but otherwise it's all theirs. And it is The ethics behind this poem are, if you can't write as well as them, then just steal mercilessly and hope they don't buy the book. I mean, in Sylvia's case, I don't think she will. American Sonnet for My Past and Future Ariel. This one goes out to Daddy. In the picture I have of you, you are the color of a sucker punch. I am sick of baggage. On some level, I'm always full of Girl Scout cookies, marble heavy, a bag full of God. My skin bright as a remix of Pony by Genuine. I turn and burn. So this is what it means to have love set you going like a fat gold watch. My hunch is that Sylvia Plath was not especially fun. A Buddha, all wants, desire falling from me like a shootout in an African American folk museum. I am a lantern. I was raised by a beautiful man. I have fallen a long way. And if you'll all indulge me just for 30 seconds before I read this last poem, I'm so grateful to everybody at Coach House. They've done such a remarkable job with the book. Thank you, James and Tally, for this event, for getting it out into the world. Matthew, thank you for all the care and attention. It's made the book so much happier. I can be a titch anhedonic putting my own work out into the world, and it's really such a comfort to know it passed through your hands. So thank you all. So we opened with an Advil poem. Let's end with one. Advil arrives. Above the asphalt morning, a murmur of clouds. Rail tracks run like two clear thoughts. The commuter train arrives with a thunk-a-thunk that paves me over. Like the heart's fleshy balm, be better, it goes where it goes. In my skull, nothing's where I left it. A marble rolls around an outcome when the outcome is unknown. I too want to be parallel. The sun lays its long hand on my face, and the breeze finger puppets a stand of trees. Light seesaws which way? I take 2 Advil and round the symptoms up, count each blistered head as it passes through the gate. Hey, thanks so much.
Yay! Let's see those clap emojis in the chat, everyone. Hooray! Andrew, that was great. Thank you so much, and for your kind words. We'll bring back Matthew now, so you guys can have a chat, but I wanted to mention to everyone that if you have a question for Andrew or Matthew, you can drop it in the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen there, and we will come back after the chat to answer as many of them as we can get to. But until then, I'll come back in a bit, but I'll leave you guys to have a little talk. Yay!
Well done, Andrew. I hope my joke went off about it being better than I remember. Of course,
yeah, no, that's great.
Imagine
I'll take what I can get.
Packed room, packed house, everybody laughing, we get the tension out. But it's a brilliant book, and everybody should go out and get a copy as quickly as you can. It's really, really tight. I think that's what I meant to say when I reread it. It's like, wow, everything came off really well. So you should be very proud of it. I'm proud to have worked on it. It's great, and thanks for the shout out. So let's chat about it. Yeah, so why did you write about headaches? I mean, I don't want to presume, but I'm going to presume that you have had headaches. You have a poem called Precautionary MRI. Perhaps that happened to you. Maybe you could just enlighten us.
Yeah, the precautionary MRI, I have had a precautionary MRI. It was an audited. I had been having headaches for a long while, and the result of the MRI was hey, good news, you don't have a brain aneurysm, which struck as less good news than I expected, because I didn't realize that was an option. Bad news, we don't know what it is. But yeah, I'd had, I'd been having recurring headaches for a while. And then I went to take Advil for one of them, and I noticed that the extra strength, the giant jar of Advil was empty, and realized, I've been taking this a lot. turns out it's not a bunch of recurring headaches. It has just been one long headache for months and months. It was a little like waking up in the middle of a river that you are midstream crossing, and it's not only this is an odd place to be, but also a little how did I get here? What was my plan on getting out?
Yeah. Not only is it cold, it's deep, right?
Yeah, it's cold and deep, and this wasn't a great idea. Who was the me who got me here? So,
yeah. So what are we talking about? You like length, time span wise? Like how?
It was about it had headaches for about 3 or 4 months maybe, when I suddenly realized, oh, this is a capital T thing, not a lowercase t thing. And then it took another year plus to sort of figure out what it was and make the better part of it go away. So it was a time.
Yeah. It becomes part of your everyday life, right? Like you just learn to live with it.
Yeah. And most people would think, we should do something about this, and I foolishly thought we could totally make some poems about this.
First thought.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it was like, maybe you should go to a doctor first. I was like, well, okay, I'll write some poems in the waiting.
Yeah. It seems like headaches, the way they come across in your book, they're very emo, like they have that loud, soft dynamic. Is that sort of, is that true? Like, did they come and go a little bit? Or is it, like you said, you were in the middle of them, but you have space to think? Is that true?
Yeah. I mean, there's no good thinking got done during the headache. Some good stuff came out after. And I mean, one of the initial reasons I became so interested in writing about Advil as sort of a companion sidekick, trickster through the headaches is Advil was the thing that was the loud, soft adjuster, right? It was sort of Advil would turn the volume down a bit, clear the head a bit, but it always turns it back up. It's like, okay, I was here for 4 hours. See you later, bud. And you start to develop a relationship with it, and stop seeing it as a thing and start seeing it as a caricature that actually has a hand on the dial, right?
So let's talk about Advil. So like the dreams, the visions, the mind and drugs are kind of like they're like challenging the backdrop of reality. Like, what is the reality there? Which one of these is going to replace the real? So Advil comes to kind of personify this in some ways to me. Like, can you describe the character of Advil that you've created? Like, what is?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little like, it was you spend enough time, it's sort of in the way that everyone has a favorite coffee mug, and you start to develop feelings towards it. It was like that on steroids, right? You start to realize, oh, I'm starting to think about Advil as kind of a person. And as I started to write about it, I mean, I'd always been really interested in books with recurring characters. Katie Rosemurgy's Miss Peach, and Ed Skoog's Mr. Skylight, the great long poem that people talk about just sort of like a light blinking. I sort of started to see Advil in sort of that same way, a character that would drop in and out. And I don't know if you've ever seen, so the people who wrote the Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote, they had like a list of rules of engagement. So like, they can't die, they can't permanently hurt each other. At the end of like the skit, they're all in a Simpsons-esque way, they're all like back to where it started, like it never happened. And I mean, the experience of taking Advil feels like that. It's like great, and then it wears off, and 4 hours later, you're back where you started.
Yeah.
And writing about it sort of felt like the same. Like Advil in the poems comes in. There's all sorts of weird, goofy things. Fires up rockets, does this and that. But then at the end of the poem, it's sort of Advil fades away, and you're back where you started.
Well, I did notice like there's a mischievous quality, certainly the cartoony, but there's also an intimacy that develops through the book with you and Advil. Is that fair to say? Like that kind of, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair to say, right? In the same way that we're intimate with anything that we engage with on a daily basis, or anything that we think about all the time. You think about something long enough and you start to feel like it's yours, even though you have no right to claim it. And so that certainly started to feel like that there a bit.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to take a different tack here. So I noticed and rereading it, especially like straight through, there's sort of like a reportage there or something. There's a bit of a distance that you've sort of, it's either in the language or it's in the way you talk about the experience. Like even in the poem you read today, the self-portrait in another room, you have a line that says, always next door to where he is. There is that kind of feeling that you're looking either from a bird's eye perspective or some sort of outer body experience. What is this distance just kind of a way to cope with the pain, or is there something to do with the poem itself and how it functions?
Yeah, both, sure.
Yeah.
So it, I mean, when I think everyone is like this, when you're sick, you feel like, oh, I have to get back to who I am. I'm not the sick me. I'm the, like, there's a baseline level of health that, like, that's where I am. You know, this is sick me over here, and healthy me is right here. So I just need to, like, scooch over a bit and then take the healthy me's place. But then, of course, you scooch over and healthy you's not there. Healthy you is always beside you, and you never quite feel like yourself. And you know, after a year and a half, you start to think, well, maybe this is who I am.
Yeah.
And then on a tactical level, when you get into the poems, it's so everybody Googles symptoms in web, like in Google, right? I'm sick. You know, what does it mean to, you know, have snot that's blue, whatever. But you always, when you type that in yourself, like you're talking about yourself, but you Google the symptoms generically, right? You're playing your own doctor, and in many ways that's sort of what this is, right? You're self-diagnosing yourself, so you're trying to get out of yourself, but only so that you can better, you know, see yourself and fix it. And so it's a weird sort of looking in the mirror, pretending you're looking at somebody else, but for your own benefit. It's a weird, like, multi-reflection.
Is the poem then sort of the poem in general, not just for you, but would you consider it a diagnostic tool? You know, like
Yeah, totally. I mean, if the one conception of poetry is you want to try to still show a stone in its stoniness, and so yeah, it's absolutely a diagnostic. Like, what's this thing I'm looking at? It just gets extra trippy when the thing you're looking at is your own symptoms, which you don't feel like is you because you're not the sick you, but I mean, it is you, and it's a whole, like, at one point I try to, you know, sketch it out, and the diagram was just a bunch of, like, circles, and it's like, yeah, I don't think this is working. Maybe I'll just stick with the poems. So.
So in some of you talk about punching into Google and stuff. So Andrew, in this book, in Heady Bloom, there's 2 long poems at the beginning and the end, and these goes through not migraine sufferers through history, because they probably didn't know about migraines back then, but certainly people who have suffered in some ways and maybe attributed it to various things in the world. And they always seem to me sort of like a premise. The first poem is a premise, and the last poem is like a conclusion. I wonder, you draw this line between suffering and belief in a lot of these poems, and maybe that's just a historical context, but I wonder if you could expand on that a little bit. What you have this line that says, and maybe you kind of cribbed it, I'm not sure, or quoted it or paraphrased it, suffering and ascendance require the same work. What does that mean?
I absolutely stole that. I think that might also be Terrence Hayes. I really hope nobody's, like, friends with him. That's all. That's it. Like, this is the only things left from him. He's great. His books. And it does require. I think it does require the same work. I mean, I read that line and was like, oh yeah. I mean, that's cool that I've been working on this 10-page poem for like a year and a half, and he just did the whole thing in a line. I mean, this is why he gets the teaching posts, and you know, I'm here. But yeah, if pain is pain, the headaches, the whatever, are the neutral phenomena that happen to us. I mean, you then at some point either have to decide, or it gets decided for you. You know, is this how do you deal with that, right? How do you interpret that? You know, there's one saint that it mentions that's like, oh, you know, does she have a brain tumor, or is she really seeing visions of God? I mean, the answer obviously is like, she got a brain tumor. But I mean, that's sort of the big decision is once you have these things happen to you, how do you respond to it? I remember talking to a therapist once who said that the whole goal of therapy was to try to develop proportionate responses to the things that happen to you. and of course he's talking about, not flipping out when someone says something or not second guessing or whatever. But it struck me that that's sort of the case of my whole project too, right? If you feel like kind of feel like dying, like what's a proportionate response to that when you don't want to die, right? And where do you place the belief? How do you deal with the suffering? And sort of where do you fall on that scale? The other real like secret trick of it maybe is writing about illnesses is really, really boring. Nobody likes to read about it. It's not fun to write about. Like nobody does it for a reason. It's really hard. It's really, really hard because nothing happens, right? And so some of the only tension I could find, and maybe this is my feeling as a support, but some of the only tension I could find is in that ambiguity of like, okay, you have this thing happening. Well, what does it mean? And it turns out that that's a tightrope you can walk for 80 pages or so.
And no more.
I know more. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. I wonder if in some cases, if the responses of the saints were proportionate in their mind to the amount of suffering that they had. You know what I mean? Like, yes, of course I'm seeing visions of God. What else could it be? Because I am just, I'm dying here.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you start bleeding from the ears, and you're in a 17th century monk. Like, I'll take the visions of God because the alternative is not so palatable.
Yeah. I wonder if there's something in the poem too, because we talk about the poems kind of breaking down causation, like why is this happening to me, that sort of thing. Is it a way out of causation? Like, okay, I'm having headaches because A, B, and C in my chemistry or whatever, or and trying to find something that's maybe not factual but still real. Is that possible?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, and the distinction between factual and real is a great one, right? Like these things are happening, but how is it real to you? And then what are you going to do with it, right? Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Could you write the next one for me?
Yeah.
This is like, man, between you and Terrence Hayes, you guys are like lapping me.
I can edit the next one for you.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Okay, let's go a little bit into the language here, because Andrew's got a great facility with metaphors and similes, and you're a big fan of the simile, which I am as well. I find it's like metaphor's friendly cousin. I'm just going to read a few that show up in this book. So money arrives like the cool side of a pillow. Absolutely, it does. That's great. The night slinking around like a baseline's gravel-throated slander. Simile into metaphor, beautiful. A light breeze passes through his body like a wink at the devil. What is it about these? What is it about them? I find they're kind of funny, right? Some of the stuff that certainly the poems that you write are funny. There's humor imbued in them, and you get that through some of these juxtapositions, these sort of the similes and metaphors that you use. Do you consciously try to be funny? Is it just sort of method acting where you're just like, well, this is the narrator that I am, and these are the poems that I want to write? How does humor come to play for you as a technique in a poem?
Honestly, I'm just a really funny guy. It's just like I think in that baseline poem. I think in that the baseline poem. I think I initially had the baseline slinking about wearing Uggs or something, and Lee read it, and she was like, "Yeah, too much, right?" So the secret to my funny is like, I make a bad joke, Lee fixes it and makes it a good joke. You fix it and make it a great joke, and so it's important to have like your people who help you. I mean, I think a lot of the way that jokes are delivered and the way that metaphors and similes work, a lot of it relies on the same sense of surprise, relies on the same sense of transfers of energy, and like you said, there's a certain sort of tautness, right, to them, and some of it just sort of happens naturally, and some of it is a bit of a layering thing. It's really interesting to me to see how. Okay, so there's a long poem in this that sort of retells a Norm Macdonald joke, and one of the things that Norm Macdonald used to do is he in stand-up routines is he would try to lose the audience. and then just to see if you can reel them back in. And it's a little bit of that. And how can we keep like sort of a poem about like headaches or about sad stuff, but how can you also still insert something funny in it, or something sort of a different tone, build a fuller sound without losing the plot, so to speak. And so there's certainly a lot of that.
So you're saying it's like misdirection almost. Is that true?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, if a lot of the poems, I mean, a lot of the poems are sort of sad, feel bad, feel like they're on their way to the gallows. I mean, part of being on the way to the gallows is gallows humor, right?
Right.
So it's sort of how do you get that element without losing the walk to the gallows, so to speak.
Yeah, there's also something to me about humor that it sort of parallels the metaphor and a joke kind of have certain parallels to them, like that element of discovery and surprise that you talked about is sort of like in a good metaphor that you find that in a joke as well. Certainly the payoff of a joke, for example, when people get it, or hopefully they get it.
Yeah, and I don't think this is just what metaphors do, but one way they work is, they transfer energy from if it's an equation, from like the left side of the metaphor to the right side of the metaphor. But there's always there's never a perfect match, because you would just be comparing like the exact two same things. So there's always some energy loss, so to speak. And one way to make it a productive energy loss is to have the energy that bleeds out also be like a joke or a little punchline or a fun little like wordplay, so that it's doing something as well, or at least puts a cap on it or something.
Yeah, that's interesting about the tension, because I feel like in that moment of release of tension, whether you're laughing at a joke or you read a really good metaphor, you kind of open in that moment to something new, to a novel idea, right? And so you can take in the poem, or take in that new direction that the poem goes in, or something like that. Yes, I think we could probably open it up for about time for Q&A. James?
Hey. Hey, good chat, guys. Before we get going, I kind of wanted to kick off with a question of my own. We do have a few we'll get to, I promise. Andrew, are you wearing the same outfit that you are in your author photo?
Oh my goodness, no. Okay, well, I may as well be. I think this is like a newer version of the exact same shirt.
Okay.
So yes. Yeah. This is great.
That's that hard-hitting kind of questions you want. Right after that, at such thoughtful questions, we should try to lose the audience.
Yeah, no, exactly. And then reel them back in. No, I see why co-chairs pays you the big bucks. This is good.
I wouldn't say big bucks, but I do have a serious question though. When you were writing these poems, I mean, this book is the book of poetry is like the book of poetry I enjoy, because there's a lot of things that are consistent and repeat and run through them. Did you sort of have an idea you wanted to do that at the beginning, or did you notice these things coming up? The saints, the Advil, the buddy cop, the humor, all of this as you went?
I wanted to do a repeating the whole thing, the whole time. I didn't quite know what. There were like 5 different full drafts of the book. The first like 3.5 were really bad. The extra little half was okay, and then sort of finally settled on, okay, maybe this is something that works. I really like the recurring stuff. It's fun. It means you have to have fewer ideas, because you can just reuse the same ideas and just like put some paint on it. It's great.
That is true. Okay, let's get to some questions from the audience. But just a reminder, if you want to drop in the Q&A, go ahead. This one's from Patty Scott. In the poem XO from your first collection, there's a line that references a girl, a headache, and an aspirin. Which one was Lee back then, and what has changed since? XO, so a smooch and a hug there too.
So before I answer that question, James, could you ban Patty Scott from future Coaches events? This is that's neither. All 3. Lee's great. Lee did so much work on this book. I don't think I can say she's anything but the other.
Is there a connection between? That is interesting that there was at least an aspirin and a headache in.
Yeah. I don't think there's an I don't think there was a connection, though. That was one of the later poems I think I wrote for the book, so it very well could have been sort of the beginnings of this one. Honestly, I have so few ideas. There's also like I think a pinball poem in both books. My range is very limited, so it's you stick with what you got.
You say that very self-deprecatingly, that your range is limited, but I think there's also a really good kind of book that limits itself, a kind of poetry that is self-limiting, in the way that it doesn't try to talk about everything. It just wants to talk about, what its chosen focus is. This is an obvious example, but your first book as well has a lot of the same elements.
Yeah, I do really like books that are like, here's the stake out the ground I'm covering, and now we're going to cover all of it. It's nice. It's nice. It makes it feel like more of like a collection rather than, here are 50 poems I wrote, and now we'll bind them up and off you go.
Yeah. This next one's from an anonymous attendee. It's a two-part. I think it's from the same person. First of all, they say Motrin or Advil, and then they go on to say, "Is Advil a character you feel faithful to? Afraid to abandon it? Would trying Motrin be a betrayal?"
Oh yeah, Motrin would absolutely be a betrayal. No, Advil sounds nicer. I had ibuprofen a lot to try to be, generic, go cheaper drugs, and it just doesn't. Ibuprofen does not have the same ring to it. So
it's a bit of a mouthful. Like I think it's a pretty word on paper, right? But
yeah, and it was whichever company I thought was less likely to hit me with a lawsuit, and Advil seemed less litigious. So
that's fair.
Yeah.
This one, heads up, is from Andrewforbes. You still want me to read it?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. I'm vending all your questions. That's not a comment to you, Andrew, but I don't know. I'm already banned one person here from all.
Yeah.
Today. I don't want to go.
Yeah, just one by one. We'll just kick them out, right? Line up.
Wish we had a virtual bouncer here, just be tossing. Yeah. Andrewforbes asked, "What about edibles?"
Sure. No. Fair question. Yes to edibles, but best of luck to you in writing a coherent poem afterwards. If you can do it, you're a better man than I am. So.
Were you able to write while you had a headache?
I was able to write in that I could type things, but the first draft of the book that I finished sort of end of the headache stretch. It was 80 pages of Norman Doobie, the poet, lines mashed up with like Taylor Swift stuff and like Taylor Swift's like concert. I mean, it's a bad idea. It is like patently a bad idea. So I could write. Clearly I couldn't vet ideas well enough. So from humble beginnings, right?
Yeah. This next one's from Aaron Pepler. How long after the resolution of the headache did you start writing? Or did you write during this period? Sorry, Aaron, I totally stole your question there. I didn't realize that. But I guess Aaron's also wondering here, how long after the headache stopped did you really?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a really slow, like pick away at things writer. So, right away after. But it took a long time to take shape. Lots of like, I'll write a whole bunch of stuff, shave 10 pages down to a page and a half. Then write another 10 pages and shave it down to another page and a half, and sort of accumulate things rather than write in full bits. So it's kind of easier to do write in fits in spurts. So it kind of worked out well. I don't recommend it. It took me. I did the math a couple days ago, and I think I wrote like 850 publisher words a year, which is like a miserably slow pace. But it's better than 750.
This was from Will Smith, not the Will Smith that most of us are thinking of, but another Will Smith. How did you go about reconstructing moments of illness from outside of it? Having said that, no thinking can be done within a headache.
Yeah. That's a great question. It's not a thing you forget, and also I think. It's not recreating the the actual headache itself, so much as sort of the experience of it. And it's easier to remember the experience of it than like actually try to remake the headache. I remember someone saying once that, if you try to write about being boring, it's a real fine line between just writing a boring poem. And that was certainly a thing that I struggled with here. Is it's hard to write about pain without it itself being really like painful and boring and all that. So that was more the struggle of how do I write something that is actually going to be useful or interesting to somebody else. And I found that sort of guided what made it in, rather than trying to be strictly faithful to I was this miserable on this day, and I was this miserable on this day.
I have to say it's a bit devoid of misery at all. Like you certainly get pain across, but there's not a lot of self-pity at all through the book.
Yeah, I mean, there's one of the best pieces of advice I got is, you go to a dinner party, there are 4 or 5 things you never talk about. You don't talk about your renovations because nobody cares. You don't talk about your dreams because nobody cares, or like how cheap the beer was on your last vacation because nobody gives a shit. And you don't talk about like your mild or moderate ailments either, because all of a sudden, like nobody cares. Right? Nobody wants to hear about your broken toe. My apologies to broken toe sufferers in the audience. And so that was sort of nobody really wants to hear the misery. I got really bored with it really quickly. It wasn't coming out faithfully or interesting on the page. And if you can't have either of those, well, the lanes started really narrowing on what would work pretty quickly. And we sort of just went in that, I sort of went in that direction.
That's fair. This one's from Kat W. Hey, Andrew, I loved the question you posed to yourself earlier in regards to your headache. Who is the you that got you there? I'm wondering, who is the you that got you out of there? I hope that question makes sense. I hope I said that correctly, Kat. But in posing, I guess, which is a bit of the distance between the who is the you look back on here.
Yeah, I mean, I was the me who got me in the middle of it. I mean, it is my body. It's the things that happened to me in a like practical, like non-writing way. I mean, we rely on family and friends, and me in particular, I lean so heavily on my wife Lee. Like in the back of the book, I say she carried me through the headache years, and like she literally carried me through the headache years. And made it possible so that on the other end I could write a bunch of poems about it. But the general question of like who's the you where? I mean, that's kind of the thing, right? Like, are you the you who's sick? Are you the you who's getting better? Are you the you who's not quite getting better? And yeah, sure, yeah, all of it.
I really like to return briefly to you talking about how boring you found the midst of pain being. Like, I think there's a lot of interesting visual representations of pain, especially in like art and movies and things like this, where it's like, a bright light and it's like, it's really piercing and stuff, but it's also whether you're really sick or maybe even just really grieving something, if you're having a different kind of like psychic pain as well, it gets to this point of just, sort of being like depression, like this long gray boring tedium. It doesn't seem almost like a badge of honor or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, I at one point I recall handing Lee a stack of poems of first drafts. I mean, she looks at everything for me. I mean, life took Mary, another writer. It's fantastic. But anyway, she was looking at a sort of stack of poems, and her feedback was, look, these are all like great, they're all doing what you want them to, but they're all the exact same poem. So pick one, I guess. I mean, when you're sick, nothing happens, right? You either stay the same, or you get worse, or you're no longer sick. But nothing really happens. Like there's no tension there. So you can sort of describe this static state. But once you've done that, I mean, okay, awesome. You've still got another 75 out of 80 pages to fill. So if you want to do like a book on this or describe it, you have to do something more. I mean, that's why I think up until recently, there's so little actual literature that's dedicated, like fiction poetry, that's dedicated to illness. Because it's like conceptually interesting, but then when you start to like show like what it looks like, Like it's really flat. It's really one note. And so the big trick is how do you do something with it when it's not doing anything itself, right? Which is why you bring in the jokes, you bring in the Advil as a character, and whatever other tricks you can find.
Matthew, do you have anything else to ask?
Yeah, sure. I have a bonus question. When you were talking about repetition, static, existence, that kind of thing, one thing I came across when I was editing your work was you use repetition of words. It's one of the hardest things I find to do in a poem, is to repeat a word and have it not be edited out. You know what I mean? Like, use a different word there. We have a whole palette of words. Why are you using the same one? So this is a quote from one of your poems. Advil is thick, as always, Advil is thick with representation. And you do that quite, like, almost to the point where, like, okay, this is maybe a technique that or something you're falling back on, but every time you go to say, well, use a different word. No, there's a reason why you repeat that word. Was that something is that a rhetorical device? How did you come to that?
Yeah, I mean, in that case, yeah, a little bit of rhetorical advice, or that a lot of rhetorical device. I mean, it's a really hard thing to do, but it's also a really fun thing to do. Like when you stick the landing, it's like, fuck yeah, I got it. And it's a way to, I think, to sort of have some movement, but also show that you're still staying in the same place, right? Because if nothing's happening, I mean, you're going to repeat a lot of words. You're going to have the same thing sort of happening over and over again. But of course, you can't quite stay where you are. I'm also, as a general principle, I think to a fault, wary of taking too large of steps, losing the reader. And that's certainly one way to put up some signposts, hopefully in a useful way. No, we're still going in this direction. And at least in that spot.
Yeah. Well, there's two effects, or more than two effects, but another effect that you get from it is when you repeat the word and the word becomes something new. One of my favorite lines from your book is the view broken up by more view. Like that, it's just, I think about that a lot, about how that happens all the time. The view is broken up by more view, and the second view just becomes something else. Like, it's just, that's not a question, it's just a compliment. Well done, I think.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's not to harp on the Norm Macdonald stuff too much, but he was always looking for the perfect joke, the joke where like the punchline is a setup to the answer. And I don't think there's a poetic version, but like to be able to start and start a line and end it on the same place, but have it be different places is it's a fun thing to try. So
yeah, well done.
Thanks.
I think my favorite Norm Macdonald joke is when he was saying, top of the charts, the music charts this week is better than Ezra. And then number 2, Ezra.
Yeah.
We have one last comment from Aaron Papler again.
Before we do, I'm gonna be that guy. I'm gonna do the self-portrait from another room in the same room.
Oh yeah.
Thanks, boss.
Aaron just wanted to say that they want to see the Taylor Swift book, your version, with all the Taylor Swift poems put back in there.
Yeah, I've been wondering what I'm going to do for the next book, and I've been telling myself I'm not going to get into a new project too early, but I think I just got into the next project. That's great. Thanks, Aaron.
I'd like to thank everyone who came tonight. Andrew, congratulations. Thank you so much. This is an incredible book. It's really been an honor to be a small piece of it and at least get to pitch you to festivals and send your book to journals and whatnot. Matthew, thank you for coming. That was a really great conversation. I'd like to thank Tally Vroon, who's been running our Zoom for us all night. Thank you very much, Tally. Go out. I'm going to drop into the chat one more time, I think. No, I don't have it here. But go out and buy Heady Bloom from the Coach House website. Tally, can you drop it in one more time just in case? Get it from us. Get it from your favorite independent bookstore if you can. Yeah. Andrew Faulkner, Matthew Tierney, thank you. Heady Bloom.
Thank you so
much.
much.
Have a good night, everybody.